First 3 months of any year, films are notorious for being awful during these months. So why is it The Witch is a horror film and an independent made one at that, and it was actually good? Guys, The Witch follows the story of a family in the 17th century as they get kicked out of a village and they have to live on their own. They build their own house. They have to get their own water, they have to get their own food. It was a different time period. In doing all this, they gained an appreciation for the outdoors and whatnot. But they also kind of scared because, keep in mind, this was a time period where everyone was very religious, and this group of people, this family, is as such too. So they are kind of superstitious. But do they have a reason to be superstitious of these woods? And that is what the question of the movie asks. This was a very well-directed film, and ironically enough, it was a first-time director who directed this film. He took a lot of cues from Stanley Kubrick and Jonathan Glazer, who, for those of you that don't know, directed Under the Skin. This film, there was a lot of imagery that kind of reminded me of Under the Skin and 2001: A Space Odyssey, and I loved that about this film. But I also just want to take a second and really emphasize that I loved how this film focused on real horror, real tension over jump scares, just so that the audience can be like, oh, like shaken up. Because the music is by far the best thing about this movie. It's really eerie. It holds up on its own too. Before I reviewed this film, I actually was listening to it. It's a great score, and the thing is with a horror film, you need to have a great score, but oftentimes you can tell when there's going to be a scare based on the music. But with this film, there are a lot of times where any other horror film would have had a jump scare or a moment where it frightens you, but it doesn't. It's like, it's tension without the jump scares. It's just brilliant directing. And the acting was actually top-notch too. And that's kind of a surprise because it's mostly kids, you know, and kid acting is notorious for being bad. I can't really think of a child actor besides Haley Joel Osment in a horror film where they were actually really good. So props goes to the actors, child actors at that in this film. I have to say, this is really a surprise that this movie was this good because it came out in February. And, you know, as a movie buff and as a movie critic, it's just kind of like, it's good to see a movie that is just so refreshing, and it's terrifying to think that this was like folklore, but it was also taken from real events. A lot of this dialogue actually came from like books and stories that people were telling. So on that note, as far as negatives go, some of the dialogue, it's a little too hard to like not comprehend, but like understand, because they use a lot of like like Shakespeare. So it's like, if you can kind of understand Shakespearean language, you'll understand it, but for those that don't, it's kind of like a negative. And another minor negative is that there are some things in the movie that really isn't explained. Now, albeit this is my first time watching the movie, so the more I watch it, I would probably understand more and more of it. But and also, this isn't a negative, but it's just for those of you out there that are like, expecting like a blockbuster. This isn't that film. This is an experimental art house film that delves more with themes and messages than plot points. There's very little plot in this film. Plot points at that. There is plot in this film, but not plot points. There's very little of that. But the storytelling method in being experimental, it's very interesting. And I gotta say, it's one of the best horror films I've seen probably in the last 10 years. It really haunted me and it stuck with me. So I will be giving The Witch a 4.5 out of 5-star rating, and I would highly recommend it. Horror fans especially. Just don't go in expecting like, I don't know, Insidious. It's not like that at all. But check it out, and if you haven't done so already, hit the subscribe button, and if you have seen The Witch, let me know what you think in the comment section below.